Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's LexisNexis Read Tech webinar, Mastering Health Canada XML PM Mandates, Insights and Strategies from LexisNexis Read Tech. For today's webinar, we have three subject matter experts from Read Tech here excited to present to you all. We made sure that we got some of our experts from the front lines who are very experienced in these submissions to give us some firsthand knowledge about challenges and some real life examples. So we're very excited to welcome Mary Frash, our head of regulatory compliance delivery, Dennis Ling, a regulatory consultant here at Read Tech, and Gary Seener, our solutions consultant at Read Tech. Today, Mary, Dennis, and Gary are going to cover the following topics. We're going to talk a little bit about Health Canada XML products at a high level, just from an overview perspective, catch up on anything you have missed so far. We're going to talk about the timing of these requirements, preparation and submission. Then we'll get into some real life experience that we here at Read Tech have come across so far in our experience of submitting over 50% of the current submissions. And then we'll have a Q&A session live where if you have anything that you'd like to know, please feel free to throw that in the chat. I will be monitoring it throughout the session. And when we get to the Q&A, hopefully we'll have time to answer all those questions live. We did also just want to point out really quick, for anything that we don't cover on this webinar today, we would encourage you to check out the rest of our educational resources. Definitely a great place to go is the Knowledge Center on our website, readtech.com. You can click right there on the pharma and cosmetics link or follow kind of the circled navigation as you see on your screen to read some blog posts. We also send out regular newsletters and post updates on LinkedIn and X. So we encourage you to sign up for all that and follow us for subject matter expertise. So with that, I'm going to hand the webinar right off to Gary to get started. Gary, welcome today. And can you jump right in and give us an overview of the XML product monographs?
Well, thank you very much, Aaron. I'm pretty excited here, and along with Mary and Dennis, to share some information on the product monograph. This healthcare product has, or project has some long roots. It goes way back in time, 2017 and perhaps a little bit before that. And it's kind of been very hot and heavy at times where there's some activity, and then kind of went into some periods of lax. I know a lot of internal activity was taking place, but from the public point of view, maybe it was kind of dormant for a little bit. But anyway, comes and goes. But right now's a year to jump in because things are heating up very heavily. We'll try to do a quick overview for those people that are maybe touching base with the XML product monograph topic for the first time. This doesn't intend to be, a deep dive or a full education, just a quick high-level recap of things that have been happening. To understand XML product monograph, you need to understand Health Canada product monograph. So a little bit of a twist there on words, but product monograph does refer just to that factual information, that information about the drug product. This is authored by the manufacturer. There's three parts to this document. One, targeting the health professional. There's a lot of scientific information in the second part, and then there's a third part targeting the patient so that they're able to use the product in a safe and effective manner. And that's long-standing. So, that's not the newsy item. There's obviously some changes and evolution of that product monograph that we'll talk about. But in addition to that long-standing document, there was an initiative started in Health Canada to capture that information, the product monograph information about that drug product, in a different type of format. So typically Word was used to author content, PDF was used to disseminate and distribute the information. XML is a different format. It has a lot of tagging and structured elements where you can code information. And the interest at Health Canada was very much like the US FDA and other health authorities, where they wanted to improve this accessibility and the quality and facilitate machine use. So XML has that unique capability of being able to be legible by the average reader. You're able to render it and read it with a simple browser, but yet behind the scenes, it has some great tagging and structure that allows machine to do some searches and filtering and adopt the data in different types of presentations. Now, the other thing that is unique with XML product monograph is that the contents are over and above just the product monograph document itself. So there's additional structured information, metadata, that is collected on the organization and also on the product. So we'll take a little bit of a look at that, but that it should be, you should be aware that it's not identical, same contents. It's an additive. There's additional information in an XML product monograph that you would not see in a regular product monograph. One of the first questions everyone has is, well, what's the scope? You know, how far does this reach? Health Canada has defined human prescription drugs, those regulatory activities that use the ECTD, and now there's a 2024 template, which we'll be talking about. So those things are in scope. Things that are not in scope would be your over-the-counter products. So the non-prescription, self-care, natural health, medical devices, food, veterinary, it's a rather long list of things that are not in there. I believe there might be a time, just like the FDA started off with this one particular drug product or type of drug, and then they expanded to many uses. This probably happened in the Health Canada arena as well. We need to take a second and think about the product monographs, the evolution of that. It's a dynamic story going way back, even prior to 2024. Health Canada has put some templates together on how you create this document that describes the drug product. And there's a couple iterations here that are highlighted, 2004 and 2014. 2016 is significant in that it consolidated 6 different variations into a single document. So this consolidated 6 different types of templates into a single document. And this was about the time that Health Canada was looking at XML product monograph. So 2017 timeframe, they started to look at this and say, maybe we need to modify this and make it a little bit more in line with our current thinking, as well as make it suitable to build XML from it. So 2020, there was a very significant release version that was generated for a master product monograph template. That particular version was used to create XML product monographs instances. So having a very standardized format allowed the guidance documents and all the surrounding validation and so on to be pointing to a single version. It did require, if you had versions going back to 2014 or even through 2016, you had to migrate content to 2020 before you created the XML product monograph. And then guess what? Time marches on. We're not quite finished. We're not static. Just a few months ago, December, right before Christmas, Health Canada rolled out yet another version. So now we have a new version of the product monograph, the 2024 version. So that is the one that is being used currently to create XML product monographs. There may be some in the audience that are familiar with the FDA, the US FDA's approach to drug labeling. They use structured product labeling. And in the background underneath XML product monograph, there's a lot of similarities. Health Canada use it as a precedent. So we're going to take just a few minutes and do a side-by-side comparison between what the FDA has in place and what Health Canada has implemented. So I know it's very valuable for those people that have that background and exposure to the FDA SPL. And with that, let's kind of walk our way through a couple comparison slides here. If we look at the scope, first of all, FDA has expanded use of this to be quite broad: human, prescription, over-the-counter biologics, veterinary. And again, as we mentioned, Health Canada starting off with only human, with a single product monograph. The FDA also had a single type of drug, doc type, if you will, when they started. But look at this. It has evolved and grown quite significantly, all the way up to like 58 different types of SPLs used in various reporting activities. Content, pretty much the same, organized differently. It's noteworthy that you might have not had exposure to product monograph metadata. And the FDA actually works with two different drug labeling formats. FDA is consolidated into one. There is another anomaly where in Canada, nothing new there, but English and French, so it's both languages need to be reported. Different identifiers for the products. A lot of these items are the same. I'll kind of just cruise down here to the authoring. FDA did provide some industry free tools, FDA X Forms and CDR Direct, that were available in addition to those industry vendors that in some cases in-house tools that were available to create the FDA SPL. When you go over to Health Canada, significantly different. There's no Health Canada tool for authoring or even for validation. So either industry tools or through an in-house solution, you'll need to look for some additional help and apps to help create that document. Those that are familiar with the FDA know that there's for approved products, there is SPL labeling that's submitted as part of the ECTD and under the labeling leaf. And then there needs to be a standalone secondary listing submission of the SPL file to the Office of the Commissioner. And when you look at Health Canada, right now it's all funneled through the ECTD. Images very much the same, except there's not a principal display panel as of yet. I think that might be coming in the future with Health Canada. The other thing is noteworthy is down here at the bottom. The labeling has for US, there's submission, there's review and updates and so on. But for the listing, once you submit it, as long as it passes validation, there's no review process that you might be contacted by the FDA. But for the most part, once it passes validation, it's going to be published in Daily Med. A little bit different in Health Canada. So there is a multi-step process where usually the primary language, English, is typically used, and then French follows. Review process for that. And so it does have a little bit of nuance there with the two languages. That's going to be the quick overview. I don't want to take much more time than that. Let's just quickly touch on some of the requirements for the timing. So this has been a topic where we've kind of heated up and then cooled off, and now we're in the very hot stage. There's a significant notice that came out November of last year, actually November 18, 2024, indicating that July, and just, 3 or 4 months away now, we have a mandate to make use of XML product monograph. It does have some limited scope, so it's only for those new drug submissions and the extraordinary use new drug submissions. It does affect the pharmaceutical products, biologics, and radiopharmaceutical products. There was and still remains in place some voluntary options where you can go ahead and submit your drug product in XML product monograph format. There's a couple conditions there for generic products and cross-licensed products. If we put this on a timeline and look way over here on the left-hand side, we'll see there was a testing phase, 2020, lasted 1 year out to 2021. And then the FDA opened up the submission, full production submissions were able to be conducted on a voluntary basis. And that's still in place. So that has not been terminated. But most noteworthy on this chart is probably the July 18th date, where now it becomes mandatory if you submit a new drug submission or have that extraordinary use new drug submission, you would be required to make use of XML product monograph as part of that ECTD approval process. We don't have any firm dates for future phases. So obviously this is just kind of a, the first little nibble, first phase of a phase 3. And we'll see how that works out in the future.
Harry, just a question, and there isn't any, these won't be publicly visible, like say in Daily Med for SPLs, correct?
Yeah, there is a drug forum that is available. So there is some information about drugs and includes prescription drugs and some other drugs you're able to download. It's not like 100% complete, but most often there is a way to access the drug labeling content. Right now it's in PDF format. We expect that, good point, we expect that to be available in XML as this program gets fully evolved and a little bit more mature. The other thing, Dennis, you you probably have been watching for phase Roman numeral 3, right? So,
Yeah.
remember they had some conversation about phase 1, phase 2, and then there was reference to a phase 3 with Roman numeral 3. And lo and behold, this turned out to be phase Arabic 1, right? So it's the take on that is that this is probably the first of maybe 2 or 3 different phases under the big phase 3 mandatory. So that's kind of interesting to see the terminology, but this is not across the board. That's the most significant thing at this point. All right, so we kind of covered the background understanding what XML product monograph is all about, when's it required. Let's get a little bit more focused in on the activities of those in the audience. How do you actually prepare and submit XML product monograph? So there is, working from left to right, many of those in the audience would be drug manufacturers. They have traditional history and methods, standard operating procedures to create the source product monograph. A lot of parties involved, anywhere from product team, legal team, regulatory, scientists. A lot of people are involved in authoring that. And then there long-standing requirement for French or English and French version. And then, making sure that was part of an ECTD tool and submitting it through electronic submission gateway into Health Canada. David, over here is a reference to that forum that called the Drug and Health Product Register, where the current labeling documents are actually publicly available. But
I like that it's a hockey puck, by the way.
Yeah, that's very appropriate for the Canadian audience, right?
That's true.
Yeah, the little kicker here in this process is this XML product monograph build activity. So that was never in the mix. It doesn't change the way you necessarily author content, but you do have to spend some time coming up with that metadata and describing the product. And this is a brand new task. So mentioned that there's not too many supports from Health Canada. Well, I should make sure that it's clear that there's a lot of very good documentation and guidance documents. samples. They've been very forthcoming in providing a lot of background information, and yet they elected not to provide an online authoring tool or provide an online validator. So I don't recommend anyone starting with a blank, piece of paper and going into Notepad or whatever and trying to create that XML file. It's quite daunting. So I would imagine some tool, I don't care if you necessarily created it inside your company, if you look to a vendor for that, tool to be available, there ought to be some type of assistance to make sure that you create that XML and that it is meeting all the requirements. If we take a look at the actual metadata, just over and above just tagging and structuring the narrative itself, there's roughly 80 elements about each drug product that need to be collected. The good news there is we're not going to go through every line item here, but there's information about the authorization holder and the importer and distributor if it's appropriate, and then the three snapshots here on the right would be more details about the actual product. But this, it is a full data set, very much like what the FDA collects. And in some cases, if you have products in both domains, you'll be able to share some information. But just keep in mind, there's a lot of controlled terminology that the Health Canada has in place. For example, your unique to Canada would be your English and French brand names. So you don't have that French option for the USSPL, or when it comes to ingredients or dosage form or other types of selections, there'll be an English and French code and selection that needs to be made. Let's take a quick look at what the XML raw text would look like. And we're going to go by real quickly because you should not spend a whole lot of time and effort for this because I don't know, Dennis and Mary, I know you live and breathe this stuff, but it can, I don't know, it can be quite difficult if you don't have the technical background or work with this very frequently. Suffice to say that the single document that is created in this XML with all these tags and angled arrows and so on, it can be presented in a much easier legible format over on the right-hand side. So the difference between the raw text and the rendered, guess what? It's the very same file. It's just the manner and way you present it. So here you're looking at the actual text in the background. On the right-hand side, you're looking at it through a browser. And that has a very nice table of contents. Actually, I'll give some compliments to Health Canada. They organized this very nicely. They have the three parts. You can navigate back and forth. There's live links. And then, on the right-hand side, you see the actual the text itself. In addition to that text, you also are able to see the product metadata. So this is a table presentation of that information that is collected. So those 80 elements that are collected are now organized, displayed in this particular fashion. So you're able to get a nice rendered view of the product. I'm going to take a second and talk about the help that ReTech is able to offer. And I'm going to go back to that diagram that we looked at earlier, where you're able to engage, in this case, third-party ReTech to assist you in building that XML product monograph. So there's additional value in validating the data, making sure that it meets all the control terminology, making sure that it meets something called the rules of the XML through something called a schema. So we build and are able to check that. We do version control and store it, and then give you reports, about any corrections or upgrades or enhancements that need to be done. So that can be engaged in as an option to assist you in creation of XML product monograph. With that as a background, I'm going to ask Dennis and Mary to jump in here a little bit more and talk about our experience in providing this assistance to clients. So they've been doing a number of these over the course of time, and I think there's some really good lessons that we can learn by taking just some time now near the end of this, well, the second half, I should say, of this presentation, and focusing in on the experience that you folks have had. So to start off the conversation, there's just a couple talking points here. But I would like to first have you share some information about clients' experience working with the master files and the many versions and the most recent, 2024 that came out in December. So, sitting in November, time frame, you might have thought, hey, I'm good, I'm ready to go. But now all of a sudden there's another version change. So I don't know whoever wants to start there, but let's have us. Can you share some information about that?
Sure. So first, the update from 2016 to 2020 actually changed a lot of the meaning of each section. So like I think some of the sections in section 4, which is the dosage administration, they were moved around. And later section 14, there's a lot of sections that they just changed the sections entirely. The 2020 to 2024 updates, it's more cosmetic. They changed a lot of the terminology to each heading within the product monograph. So, and also they added section 7 and the subheadings. So it's stuff like, in section 7, you'll see general and then carcinogenesis and genotoxicity. Those were previously in that section already as just just within the text, but now they've added headings for those. And really that affects the coding rather than the text. I mean, I think the English text hasn't changed much at all, but like now it will show up in the table of contents when it's rendered, as you saw in that previous version.
Dennis, I think you said, or I don't know, maybe it was Mary had mentioned something about the display names and the heading titles need to be well aligned or something.
Yeah. So that is it's a little bit different than the US SPL. They have a preferred, designated display name for each of the sections, but then the title also needs to be fully compliant with that display name, which, that they're kind of controlling what shows what is, in that, I guess, in the table of contents is what those headings end up in. So that is a difference and needs to be, we need to be mindful of that when we're converting to XML PM.
So I think I also heard you found the alignment needs to be like 100%. So unlike the US FDA
Yes.
SPL where you could have some deviations, why don't you share with the audience about that?
Yeah. So the Health Canada has, I think, made this more structured than the FDA. The terminology needs to be very specific to it has to match the controlled vocabulary information provided by Health Canada to, a very specific to the letter. So, that would include at some, in some sections, especially in the patient medication information section, that would include the spacing and punctuation. So, it does become very, very detailed.
So if I was authoring this and I had maybe an older version, not up to 2024, a question I might have for ReTech would be, are you able to help author and make some changes to my content? Obviously, not make up data, but are you able to move it around, apply the proper titles and so on for me?
Definitely, we would
Yeah.
use all the updated terminology when it's because otherwise it'll fail validation. Like if we
Yeah.
use outdated coding, it would that would generate an error when submitted.
Yeah.
I think if we encountered in a section that we couldn't, confidently apply to the latest master template, we would have to definitely discuss that with
Yeah, of course.
our customer.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And then any change, obviously, it's there for their approval, before it actually gets off and
definitely.
submitted. But
Mhm.
so they're able to see that. But anyway, it looks like there's additional content management, reshuffling, and if necessary, reauthoring, based on their approval. That's pretty interesting. That's good stuff. Are there moving away from the actual content, the narrative, over to the metadata? How much of alignment do you see with the FDA's metadata? Are there some challenges in getting new fields, or
Yeah.
is it pretty much, cookie cutter from the U.S.?
It follows a lot of the U.S. Metadata elements, but there are a few classifications that were added, additional fields that the Health Canada needs information on each product. They would include the product type, so that's pretty cut and dry. It's either pharmaceutical, biologic, or radiopharmaceutical. The pharmaceutical standard is also a new field, different from FDA, and that is that refers to the set of specifications or guidelines that the manufacturer of a drug product follow. So that would be, for example, the USP, which is the US Pharmacopoeia, and the British Pharmacopoeia. Also, the schedule value, that is a field which identifies the drug, the classification. The drug is the class that the drug is in. So that helps. That would include like a narcotic classification, but also it's a little more broad in Health Canada, and that would also include pharmaceutical, narcotic, OTC, and then finally the other prescription. Yep, yep. And then the last difference, major difference, is the therapeutic class. So that refers to, that's the category or group that the medication is classified in. And that would be based on their similar therapeutic effects or intended use in treating a specific medical condition. So that would be antibiotics, antihypertensives, antidepressants, analgesics, and so on.
Yeah, all those four sections they were all required.
Yes.
Oh, right. So it I guess comes with a little bit of word of caution, that you will have to do some homework. Probably, research the product monograph narrative. Perhaps refer back to scientific people that support the product. But another word of warning would be, be careful. The FDA's DEA schedule is not the schedule that Mary described, right? So even though it kind of has the same name, it's different. So you just can't
It's a
copy
little
over.
more, it encompasses, a little bit more, but it does include some classifications, narcotic classifications.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
the controlled substance ones. Okay,
Right.
interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting. So with the revolving format and the revolving vocabularies evolving over the course of time, how do I as a manufacturer keep up on these? How frequently does RETEC, can you share the information about supplying an updated data collection form for certainly the metadata? You would, as an author, go to the Health Canada to get the, the Microsoft Word narrative template for the product monograph. But when it comes to the metadata, how do we distribute that, and how frequently do we update it?
So we get emails from Health Canada whenever they update their controlled vocabulary. And for the most part, what they usually update is ingredient names, and we don't update the form for that because that would be a huge form. But otherwise, they'll also update like therapeutic class or they'll add, and usually when they're updating therapeutic class, they're adding French terminology to an already defined English terminology. And so, like each time that we update the form, then we'll send it out to clients again, the updated form. But for the most part, most of the updates have been to the master template, and that doesn't affect the metadata.
Yeah. Yep. So there's another topic. Unless there was something else that you wanted to highlight, I was going to kind of move our conversation over to the report that comes back from Health Canada. So I'm going to back up one slide here, or I guess 2 slides. But if you see this diagram where the first, typically English, XML product monograph package in an ECTD is sent through the electronic submission gateway over to Health Canada. Then there's a response back, right? So there's a report back. So let's talk about that report that comes back. There might be some rejections of the whole package itself. There might be some comments about individual items. There might be some validation errors that are identified. Let's talk about some of those things and how they're handled.
So I would say for the most part, the errors that we've seen, and we've been seen submissions since 2020, the errors we've mostly seen have been due to the master template. That they'll update a section of the master template, like they'll update say 4.3 will now be section 4.4, and then that would cause an error. Also, almost all of our submissions have failed for ingredients. Health Canada originally was following the FDA in their ingredients, ingredient preferred names, and the Unicodes attached to those ingredients. Those now they just have their own list of ingredients, and those names don't necessarily match up with the FDA substance registration tool system. And so what we have been doing was, it's best to just, if they don't have a particular name for an ingredient, like if that's not in their list, it's best to just include that ingredient in the XML when it's submitted and let it fail, because that will usually push them to add that to their list of ingredients. And then
and we've seen that happen quite often.
Especially with French. So there's a lot, most of the ingredients will have an English name, but not a French name. And so you'll submit the English one, and it'll pass, and submit the French, and it'll fail for an ingredient that's not there. And we've seen in like a week, sometimes they'll add those ingredients after the failure. So
yeah, they're pretty proactive in doing that. An option though is always to, you can email the health authority and request that it be added, but we we use the reports.
If you want to be proactive and try to get it there before you actually submit, or realize that it's been sitting a while since you got the rejection, nothing happens.
And when we process when we process an XML, we include a document conversion report that will list which ingredients will fail because it's not actually listed in the Health
Yeah.
Canada's
Mm.
system.
There are actually times where we'll enter the FDA preferred term if the Health Canada term is not available.
But we
And
did
then
note that it failed.
yeah, we would make that also. Yeah, we would note that.
Yeah, yeah. So I do know the FDA, along with the European EMA and Health Canada, are and others, Swiss Medic and so on, are collaborating in a global substance repository, the GSN, and that GSR has a lot of good momentum, and it looks like there's some sharing between health authorities. I think it's going to get stronger, um, but it allows some local values and cross-referencing to one health authority's name and identifier to another health authority's brand name or another region's name. So I think what we're probably seeing is the very early beginnings of some shared substances. So, going back to ingredients name to what you had talked about, where if we were to have this discussion maybe a year, 2 years down the road, we might have some better alignment and harmonization between health authorities. But I think just now starting to have that firmed up. But interesting that, we're trying to help fill in the gaps with the Health Canada's
Yeah,
vocabularies and lists.
I will
Okay.
say the codes are the same. They have
the Unicodes.
Unicode.
Yeah. So that's the beauty of it, having an
Yeah.
international code, right?
Yeah.
So if you go to Europe, go to Canada, US, and now you're able to share the very same code. So that is that's the really good news. Obviously, the names
Yeah.
will be different in many cases.
Definitely.
The other thing I wanted to touch on here is in conversations that we've had, you mentioned something about some sections that might be optional. And if I left them out, what happens, and how do I react? What is it okay to omit some major sections or not?
So notice
Yeah.
the compliance section and sorry, Mary.
That's okay. No, go, Dennis.
But the notice of compliance
Notice-
section and the biosimilar drug sections are they are optional, and what we've seen is that it'll generate a warning, and so the validation report, they'll have these red dots for things that are errors, like a missing ingredient. For those two sections, if they're not present, it'll just have a yellow dot for a warning, but it still passes validation when submitted.
So would you recommend going ahead and submitting that to Health Canada, leaving it in the warning condition because
Yeah.
it's still, valid. It's okay to do that. Yeah.
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 All right. Okay. Very good. Now, going a little bit deeper into some of the creation of the XML, we talked about the narrative being coded. Metadata has its own set of challenges and vocabularies. In the background, there's some organization that needs to be in place in the actual XML file. So there's parent-child relationships, there's enumeration rules that need to be obeyed, and sometimes there's various attributes for particular tags and so on. And basically syntax, getting down to the real syntax.
Yeah.
So how do we, do you just want to share how we check that
Sure.
against the, the rules, which would be, the Health Canada schema?
Sure. So we use a template that we prepared that is in full compliance with the schema. We use an XML authoring tool or editing tool that will create a well-formed, valid XML, which then would eliminate any syntax errors or schema, invalid schema references.
It'll yell at us otherwise.
Yeah.
Well,
you can't even save it.
Yeah. Well, That's the great thing that, some of these automation technology, let's dream a little bit, the AI helping us here, being able to create some of this content and check it, make sure it's all valid. That is absolutely, beneficial because it provides, strict compliance and increases the efficiency, makes it, well formed in a very quick fashion. So
Yeah.
I'm okay if it yells at you, if you don't, if you don't mind, if you don't mind. All right. So I see some time marching on here. Let's turn the discussion over to the language issues.
Yeah.
So we have English, French, obviously Canada's been, very familiar with that. But when it comes to building the XML, what are some particular experiences that you folks have had?
Well, for one thing, for English and French, these are two separate XML files. They're completely different. There's different coding for both. There's French terms for every section and every ingredient. We found it's best to submit the English version first because there's not always a French term for every section yet. They've been updating that repeatedly, pretty much weekly. So mostly ingredients, but also therapeutic class. We've seen a lot of updates with that. And so we find it's best to submit to English first and just see what errors come up with that, and then we apply, those changes to the French version. We try to follow the French version as close to the English version as possible, and then submit that separately. That should be, it would be like a week later, submitting the French and see what passes there.
So Mary, I think you alluded to something earlier where you might have a slightly different grammar or replacement French term than what you had with an English term. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So the French terminology obviously is different in that it's a different language, but it also, this is specific to the product, the ingredient controlled vocabulary. So in the ingredient controlled vocabulary, it's uppercase, all uppercase in English. And then in French, it's always going to be an upper lower display, which I think it was intentional to just kind of, show a difference at a glance. But yeah, that's a big one. And as I said before, the colons and the spacing tend to be, something that comes up especially in that section at the end, the patient information section, where it lists statements about the product. How do I take whatever Tylenol, and then space colon. You would have in French, whereas in English, the colon is butted to the text. So it's just, it's subtle, but it's meaningful.
And that's something that doesn't fail validation if that space is.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Right. Yep. So it's very exacting. Not only is it case sensitive, but it's also character sensitive, down to the spaces and grammar, syntax and so on. Interesting.
I think that's another change from the 2020 version too. I think the 2020, I think some of them were spaced and others weren't. And
there was definitely an inconsistency, I think, before.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't help the process be good and clear, does it? Well, that is all the good experience that you folks learn over the course of time. And guess what? We're not done. There's more to be learned, little nuances as this fleshes out and scales up to include more products. There's going to be more stories like this. The one thing that we want to talk about in the last item here before we leave this and get a little bit to Q&A. Hopefully there's some time here. Some FDA experiences. You folks have done thousands and thousands of, tens of thousands of SPLs. Any experiences that have you better prepared to accommodate Health Canada? Some things that you've learned, or what can you leverage from doing all those US SPLs?
Just in terms of with Mary and I think we've been doing SPLs since like 2011 or so together. At least I have been, but
2010,
yeah.
1 year before you.
Yep. But so we're used to the FDA like kind of springing new validation rules on us pretty much every year. There's some new thing. So like 2 years ago, they decided that all cosmetic drugs were going to have to be submitted, and they didn't really have everything set up for that. And so Mary and I kind of fumbled through trial and error to try to figure out what they wanted. And once we figured it out, they changed everything again.
Right,
and,
there you go.
so we're used to like kind of adapting to validation, like just trying to figure out what it is they want for in order to pass validation.
Yes, we've had to react for sure. So that has definitely, helped us in doing the same with Health Canada.
Yeah. Now, I know that sometimes the FDA will make some changes. It appears kind of out of the blue, Monday morning. Oh my goodness, I'm getting a different symptom here. What I last submitted, Friday at the end of the day is no longer the same, so something happened over the weekend. So how it's Health Canada. I know that they give a lot of alerts to changes in the vocabulary. And obviously there's notices about, the product monograph coming down, but I think one of the takeaways is that you have to be very flexible and react quickly to the changes, not only policy, but the validation requirements and so on, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
We're continuously learning and applying what we learned to this. So,
one thing just crossed my mind real quickly. There's some terms that I think you mentioned prop up. If we have a second, let's talk a little bit about some gray area between what is called the date of initial authorization and the date of authorization. So that shows up in different places. Can just talk about what's going on there, and we're looking for some final resolution.
Yeah. Dennis, do you want to address that?
So date of initial authorization is both it's a status, a regulatory status that's in the metadata. It's also on the title page of the product monograph. It's and that's been there, I think, since the beginning. Also, there was a date of revision that was on the title page. That's a big change that happened in 2024. In December, they removed the date of revision from the title page. So now it just says date of authorization. Date of revision can be entered at the end. They do have an area at the end of the patient information where that can be entered. But the date of initial authorization is Mary, what was that?
So I think that I think they changed it to just date of authorization because the initial submissions will not have a date. So I think it was maybe the initial submission date was the date of initial authorization, but now the date of authorization corresponds to the date of the market authorization of the submission under the product monograph, under the review, the Health Canada review. It's the market authorization. Yeah, that's what it is. It's the date that it was approved essentially by the health authority.
I will mention there's still a final version of the XML guidance that is, I guess, still under authorship. There was a draft version that was out, some comments, obviously were reported back, and we are waiting for final guidance. So I'll use that as a segue to mention that's one of the things that we hope we'll see very shortly, because come July, there's a number of XML product monographs that are going to be required. So we're looking for the final version of that XML product monograph guidance document. Aaron, I see the time has really evaporated, and we had some really good conversation.
Yeah.
Hopefully it was very helpful, but I don't know, are you able to slip in a couple questions here? We don't have much time,
Sure.
unfortunately.
No, that's okay. I actually think some of the questions that we got, you guys have answered since they came in. So
Good.
time was not wasted. So everyone, our contact information is here on the slide in front of you if you'd like to take that down while we do answer a question or two. And of course, we will be emailing the presentation out to everyone on the line today. So you'll have this there as well. So guys, to jump right in, a question that we actually got a few times was, when the French ingredients fails, can we still push the SPL submission through? And if so, how do they do that?
So that would just be submitted as whatever terminology they're currently using, it would be submitted with that. If they don't have a Unicode, or if we can identify an FDA Unicode, we would enter that with it. But then again, as Dennis mentioned, it would fail the submission, and then the health authority would hopefully then that would compel them to create a new term.
Yeah.
I think Health Canada sees the failure as part of the process as
Yeah.
submission.
It seems that's what, yeah.
Okay, great. And we can help walk anybody through that. I'm sure Dennis and Mary and their team are great. So
oh, absolutely.
I'm
Yep.
sure we're
We've
on top of
seen
that.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Let's try to squeeze in just one more. Is Health Canada currently accepting XML product monographs for already approved drugs? This person's just a little unclear since it was voluntary and now we're moving into a mandatory phase with some of the other drugs.
Yeah, I think that would be okay under like their voluntary program. It certainly would not qualify under this, new drug submission. But they did open the door to, a lot of different products. There was a couple caveats where if you had a generic drug, then their guidance is to wait until the reference drug was already in XML product monograph, and then you can submit yours. But let's assume that's not applicable for that particular question, and you could go ahead and submit that. There's a very good conversation, quick reaction from the email at Health Canada. So the individuals over there are very helpful. So if you just want to confirm that before you actually do the work of preparing it, just send a quick email off. You can contact us as well. We'll be able to share that and submit that question in on your behalf if you would like us to get involved as well.
Great. Well, it looks like we are just past the 3:00 hour. So Mary, Dennis, and Gary, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedules to share this information with us today.
You're welcome.
And thank you. And everyone on the line, thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure that you follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter so that you are made aware of all of our upcoming webinars, both for pharma and medical devices. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. You can reach us at pharma@readtech.com or 215-557-3010. Thanks everybody so much, and I look forward to seeing everybody again next time. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you.
for joining. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.